How long have you been with us, Grant? The question floated casually from across the boardroom table. 29 years, I replied. Then, after a pause, and 361 days. The corner of Evelyn Royce's mouth twitched almost a smirk. She'd only been CEO for 6 months, but I knew she wasn't here to honor my service. I felt it the second I saw the envelope on the glass table. Something wasn't right. I'm Grant Dalton, 62 years old, and 4 minutes ago, I was the lead safety engineer at Iron Bay Energy Solutions Zone of the biggest names in offshore infrastructure. I kept this place running above board for nearly 3 decades, with 0 fatalities under my watch. My full pension? It was set to kick in on Monday, 4 days away. But now, I was being called in on a Friday morning for what exactly? I'd given Iron Bay everything: my time, my sweat, and more weekends than I could count. For 29 years and 361 days, I inspected every rig, reviewed every protocol, and signed off on safety reports no one else dared to touch. My pension? Fully vested in 4 days. 4 days. And now I was sitting across from a woman half my age with a Harvard MBA and a reputation for optimization. My late wife, Miriam, used to say I gave too much to this company. She passed 15 years ago, and Iron Bay has been my entire world since then. But this wasn't a coincidence. This was a hit, premeditated, and timed to perfection on a Friday. In that high-rise office overlooking the Houston Ship Channel, I realized I wasn't being thanked. I was being erased. Silently, surgically, strategically. Evelyn didn't look at me when she slid the envelope across the table. Due to a strategic restructuring initiative, she said flatly, "Your role is being eliminated effective immediately." Her voice was clinical surgical. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I'd seen this game before. I never thought I'd be the pawn. 4 days shy of my pension vesting? That wasn't downsizing. That was a calculated execution. I picked up the envelope, heavy with legalese and quiet malice: 3-month severance if I signed a waiver forfeiting all future claims. No pension. No healthcare continuation. No acknowledgement of my decades of service. Just a line in a spreadsheet. Cleared before fiscal year end. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood, nodded, and walked out. Let them think I was defeated. But inside, a storm was building. This wasn't random. This was retaliation, and I knew exactly why. For the last 5 years, I'd been documenting safety violations that kept getting buried. Equipment skipped inspections, logs altered. Reports are backdated to cover missed protocols. When I refused to approve the most recent deepwater compression test, I knew it would put a target on my back. But I never expected they'd come for me this precisely. 4 days before the financial commitment? That level of cruelty has a fingerprint. The elevator ride down felt endless. I held the envelope like a coffin lid. When I reached my truck in the parking garage, I sat silently. My hands shook not with fear, but fury. I thought about Miriam. She'd warned me about unquestioning loyalty. "They don't love you back, Grant," she told me. God, how right she was. I glanced at the passenger seat. A faded photo of Usher in a windbreaker, me in coveralls, smiling on some long-forgotten coastal rig. She has been gone for 15 years now. And yet, at that moment, I could still hear her voice. "Get up. Get smart. Don't let them steal what you've earned." I started the engine. The sun was already setting over the Gulf, casting long shadows across the lot. I wasn't just walking away from Iron Bay and toward something. Toward truth. Toward fire. Toward the fight I never wanted, but now had no choice but to finish. When I pulled into my driveway, dusk had already swallowed the Texas sky. I sat in the cab of my truck, engine idling, headlights slicing across the porch of the house I'd maintained alone since Miriam passed. The air smelled like dry dust and burnt oil fitting. For 29 years, Iron Bay had taken up the best hours of my life. I missed anniversaries, birthdays, and even Miriam's last Christmas for just one more site check. I thought loyalty bought security. It turns out that it just paints a target on your back. I stepped inside and made tea like Miriam used tutu bags, no sugar. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that envelope. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just corporate downsizing. It was a deliberate, high-stakes silencing. So I stood up, walked to the back room, and unlocked the fireproof case beneath my filing cabinet. Inside was 5 years' worth of documentation. Inspection checklists altered post-signature. Equipment certifications rushed through without field validation. And internal emails. Lots of them warning executives about safety lapses. All ignored. All time-stamped. I never intended to use this material. I kept it because my gut told me something was rotting. That night, I made copies. One set stayed with me. The second, deposited in a safety deposit box at a credit union across town. The third, I'd decide what to do with that soon enough. They thought I'd go quietly, sign and disappear. But they didn't count on memory, or grief, or that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one they dismiss as obsolete. That was their mistake, and in 4 days, it would be mine to correct. That night, I made a call I hadn't considered in years. Marcus Bell, a former compliance officer at Iron Bay. We'd crossed paths in '09, and while we weren't friends, we had mutual respect. He now works for the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. I wasn't sure if he'd even pick up, but when he did, and I told him why I was calling, his tone changed immediately. "Grant, if even half of what you're saying holds water," he said, "this isn't just corporate negligence, it's federal-level misconduct." For the next 2 hours, I walked Marcus through everything: the altered safety audits, the skipped maintenance logs. Project managers signed off on the ghost inspections under pressure. He asked for documentation. I promised delivery. But before that, I had to protect it. Saturday morning, I scanned, labeled, and encrypted every page, hundreds of files. I stored copies across 3 encrypted drives, uploaded one to a secure cloud server under a pseudonym, and printed 2 hard copies. One went into my home safely. The other, into the hands of an attorney I trusted, was Jules Bennett, a quiet bulldog of a man who'd once taken down a refinery over safety fraud. By Sunday evening, the calls from Iron Bay started pouring in. First HR, then legal, then Evelyn herself. "We'd like to revisit the terms," she said. Her voice was still polished, but it cracked at the edges. I didn't answer. Not yet. They thought I was a man without leverage. But leverage, I'd learned, isn't loud, it's quiet. It's tucked in files, in time-stamped emails, in years of silence, held with discipline. And now, that silence was over. They'd built their empire on shortcuts. I was about to show them what it cost. By Monday morning, I was no longer waiting. I was preparing. I suited up in the same navy blazer I'd worn to Miriam's memorial service. It wasn't just for symbolism. It was armor. I tucked my files into a reinforced briefcase, kissed the photo of her on my nightstand, and drove straight to the regional CSB office downtown. Marcus met me at the security checkpoint with a clipboard and steel in his eyes. "Let's make this official," he said. The next 3 hours felt like a deposition crossed with a war room. 2 federal investigators joined us: Alicia No, a compliance attorney, and Gabriel Singh, a forensic risk analyst. I laid everything out: inspection falsifications, maintenance deferrals, safety protocol overrides. The manipulation stretched back years, but it had accelerated fast under Iron Bay's new operations head, Ryan Colt Evelyn's hand-picked enforcer. Gabriel flipped page after page, his expression sharpening. "These aren't oversights," he muttered. "This is systemic." Alicia leaned in. "Mr. Dalton, you understand this process is protected under federal whistleblower provisions. What you've presented may trigger a full-scale industrial investigation." I nodded. Calm. Steady. I knew what this meant. By 2 p.m., The investigation had officially launched. That evening, Iron Bay's silence broke. My phone lit up with 12 missed calls, 1 voicemail from HR, 2 from Evelyn, and a direct text. "Let's talk face-to-face, Grant. Please." But I was done talking behind closed doors. I forwarded everything to Jules, and by sunrise Tuesday, he had filed a formal complaint on my behalf. The same boardroom that once dismissed me now sat under federal scrutiny. I could almost feel the panic from that glossy high-rise in downtown Houston. By noon, a message from a reporter at the Houston Business Ledger hit my inbox. She'd heard something big was coming out of Iron Bay. I didn't respond. Not yet. This wasn't about headlines, not about revenge. It was about leverage and making sure the people who gambled with other people's lives never got to walk away clean. They'd underestimated a man with nothing left to lose. But more dangerously, they underestimated a man who remembered everything. That night, I sat alone in the den, the glow of the fireplace flickering across a room filled with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after you set something in motion you can't pull back. Miriam's photo sat on the mantel, watching. I could hear her voice in the quiet. "Tell the truth, Grant. That's what you've always done. Don't stop now." I had honored safety protocols longer than most marriages last. And now, at 62, I was pulling a pin on a grenade that could take down an empire. My phone buzzed. It was my daughter, Lila. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked. Her voice was tight, anxious. She'd seen something online, rumors about Iron Bay. Whistleblowing. And me. I paused. Then I told her the truth. "I got fired 4 days before my pension kicked in, honey. They wanted me gone. Quietly. But I've got evidence they've been cutting corners that put people's lives at risk." So I blew the whistle. There was a long silence on the line. "You okay?" she finally asked. "I'm steady," I said. "But things are going to move fast now." And they did. By Tuesday afternoon, Iron Bay's internal Slack channels were in meltdown. Anonymous employees leaked screenshots to a labor watchdog forum. Words like falsified safety records, CSB audit, and federal case started swirling around social media. The pressure cooker had exploded. At 5:42 p.m., I received an email marked urgent from Evelyn's executive assistant. They wanted to schedule an in-person clarification meeting. I declined. At 6:10, I received a second email from the company's general counsel, who strongly encouraged me to halt external communications pending internal review. I forwarded it directly to Jules with a single line. "They're sweating." But what hit hardest wasn't from Iron Bay, it came from Lila. She called again late that evening, her voice shaking. "I just got a message from someone at my firm. They're saying Iron Bay's PR team is feeding stories that you were let go for falsifying your reports, that you were bitter, unstable." I closed my eyes. There it is. Standard corporate playbook. Discredit the whistleblower. Make it personal. Twist the narrative. I told her not to worry. I've got documentation. Dates. Email threads. Signatures. They can smear me in the news. They can't erase the truth. Still, I could hear the hurt in her voice. "They're trying to ruin your name." "They won't," I said. "But even if they did, your mom would have told you the same thing I'm telling you now. The truth is always heavier. That's why it sinks deeper." By Wednesday morning, the air in downtown Houston felt charged. The Houston Business Ledger ran a front-page teaser. "Federal inquiry cripples Iron Bay operations, sources confirm whistleblower at center of scandal." The article didn't name me directly, but it didn't need to. Everyone inside the company already knew. The man they'd pushed out just before retirement, he'd pushed back harder. I had become the ghost in every boardroom meeting, the name no one dared speak aloud. At 10:12 a.m., Jules called. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. "The board has just frozen executive stock options. They've called an emergency session for this afternoon. Ryan Colt's office has been locked down." I didn't reply right away. I just stared out the window at the refinery skyline I used to take pride in, the place I once thought I'd retire from. All I could feel now was a bitter ache, not for vengeance, but for everything that should have gone differently. My phone buzzed again, this time with a direct call from Evelyn. I didn't answer. Instead, I drafted one final email, addressed to the entire executive board. I attached a summarized report of the safety violations with direct timestamps and the names of the responsible parties. I hit send. No subject line, no commentary, just facts. That afternoon, Iron Bay's internal server crashed under the weight of press inquiries, legal notices, and internal chaos. Employees whispered my name like it was both a legend and a threat. Some called me reckless. Some called me brave. I didn't care what they called me. I cared that the truth was no longer buried. And I cared that somewhere in that crumbling tower of polished concrete and false promises, the people who thought they'd gotten away with it were finally learning what it felt like to answer for what they'd done. The invitation came by certified mail Thursday morning, sealed in an envelope thick with formality and tension. It was from Iron Bay's interim executive chair, Ruth Chandler, a name I hadn't heard much before, but one that now sat atop the ashes of a collapsing empire. She requested my participation in an urgent board meeting to discuss internal compliance and corporate direction matters. Translated? Damage control. I forwarded the letter to Jules, who called almost instantly. "You're not going alone," he said. "And we're not going in silently." Friday, 9 a.m. sharp. We arrived at Iron Bay's corporate headquarters. The same revolving doors I'd walked through for nearly 3 decades now. Felt like the entryway to a battlefield. As we passed the reception desk, I saw familiar faces: engineers, analysts, people I used to mentor, averting their eyes or offering silent nods. We were ushered into the largest boardroom on the 38th floor. The view overlooked the Houston Ship Channel, vast and still, in eerie contrast to the chaos inside these walls. Around the polished mahogany table sat 7 board members, a corporate attorney, and Ruth herself. Her voice was clipped and professional. "Mr. Dalton, thank you for coming. We're aware of the seriousness of your claims, and we'd like to initiate a constructive dialogue." Jules raised a hand. "Let's be clear," he said firmly. "My client filed over 40 safety-related complaints over 5 years. Each was ignored, dismissed, or buried. His termination 4 days before pension vesting wasn't just suspicious, it was strategic. Now that a federal investigation has begun, you want to talk?" The room fell quiet. Ruth cleared her throat, shifting visibly in her chair. "We believe mistakes were made under prior leadership. Mr. Colt has been placed on leave. Miss Royce has stepped down. We want to work toward a resolution." I leaned forward, finally speaking. My voice was calm, but carved from stone. For years, I flagged red alerts on inspections, maintenance failures, and emergency drills that never happened. I didn't do it for glory. I did it because one missed valve, one unchecked system, could kill someone. "You didn't just ignore me." I paused. I looked each of them in the eye. "And then, when it became inconvenient to keep me around, you didn't just fire me. You tried to erase me." Ruth opened a folder before her and pushed it across the table. "We're offering reinstatement with full pension rights and a retroactive employment record. Additionally, we're prepared to discuss a consulting role in shaping our new ethics and safety division." Jules didn't flinch. "Before we consider any offer," he said, "we expect a full accounting of internal suppression. Who knew what and when? Transparency first. Trust, maybe later." The board attorney stepped in, beginning to deflect, but Ruth raised a hand. "He's right. There has to be accountability." For the next hour, we listened to half measures and soft apologies. They painted themselves as victims of Evelyn Royce's management. They claimed ignorance of the documents I'd submitted and of the memos I'd sent. It was political, theatrical parts, fear, and performance. I stayed silent primarily, studying them. These people had known my name for years but never truly seen me. Now, they couldn't stop looking, some with regret, some with calculation. As we prepared to leave, Ruth made one final attempt. "Grant, we hope you'll consider staying involved. Your voice. It carries weight now. I stood. I smoothed my jacket. I looked out the window one last time. I sent 18 reports, I said. Held 9 private meetings. Requested 3 formal reviews. Nothing changed. I turned back to the room. Now that there's press, subpoenas, and shareholders pulling their money, you're ready to listen? Number, I won't be your redemption story. I'll tell the truth to the investigators, just like I always did. Does that truth help you or bury you? That's not up to me. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing in the room. As Jules and I walked to the elevator, he nudged my arm. You held the line. Just like Miriam taught me, I said. Tell the truth. Stand firm. Let the chips fall. The elevator doors opened, and I exhaled without tension in my chest for the first time in weeks. This wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. And it had only just begun. When Jules and I stepped out of Iron Bay's glass fortress and into the Houston heat, I knew the boardroom wasn't the final battleground. It never is. Institutions like that don't just surrender. They counterpunch. And they do it quietly through rumors, narrative spin, and calculated PR tactics. Sure enough, by that evening, I got the first taste. Lila called again this time. Her voice was raw, angry. Dad, turn on Channel 7. Now. The anchor's tone was rehearsed, concerned. Sources inside Iron Bay confirm the former safety engineer at the center of the ongoing federal investigation is a disgruntled ex-employee, terminated for performance issues and insubordination. While the company cooperates fully with regulators, it stresses that no evidence of wrongdoing has been verified. There it was. There is no mention of my 30 years of spotless record. There is no context about the evidence submitted. It was just a neatly packaged smear job designed to muddy the waters and question my credibility before the public could hear the facts. I turned the volume down and stared at the screen. Miriam used to say, when the devil can't silence you, he'll try to discredit you. And they were doing precisely that. Emails started rolling in. Some supportive, some skeptical. Is it true you altered records and tried to blame others? One asked anonymously. Why are you trying to take down the whole company over a pension? I didn't respond. Not to them. Not yet. But I did call Marcus Bell from the CSB. They've gone public, I told him. They're twisting the narrative fast. We anticipated that, he said calmly. You did the right thing. Our forensic team is already deep into the data trail. Don't engage publicly. Let the evidence speak. I wanted to believe that, but I also knew how fast falsehoods spread and how slow truth walks. So I made a decision. The next morning, I went to the small local bank, where Miriam and I had opened our first joint account. In the vault was a safety deposit box I hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside, a sealed manila envelope. 3 years ago, I printed and archived email threads between Iron Bay's former COO and 2 board members, discussing how to adjust reporting numbers during an offshore acquisition deal. I hadn't included those in the initial whistleblower filing because they predated the most recent violations. But now, they were relevant, crucial, even. I scanned the documents that afternoon and forwarded them to Marcus under a secure channel. 10 minutes later, he called back. Grant, this changes the scale. This shows the problem wasn't just Evelyn's leadership. It's cultural, structural. Some people still sitting on that board signed off on this. That night, Iron Bay's official press release struck a different tone. Defensive, yes, but a little less sure of itself. Iron Bay Energy Solutions remains committed to transparency and accountability. We urge all parties to allow the facts to be thoroughly reviewed before drawing conclusions based on incomplete information. The cracks were showing, but it wasn't just the company feeling the heat. Lila received a call from her HR department. Reporters are contacting us, they told her. We understand your father is at the center of a sensitive issue, but we must protect the firm's image. She said, Dad, I felt I was being investigated. I wanted to tell her not to worry, that it would blow over, but I couldn't, because this wasn't just about me anymore. The company was willing to smear me by extension, dragging my daughter into the spotlight to make me flinch. But they underestimated something. They thought I was afraid of public scrutiny. I was afraid of silence, seeing something wrong, and doing nothing. That was the fear that kept me awake. Not headlines. Not backlash. I'd lived too long and buried too much to flinch now. So, I contacted an investigative reporter I trusted, Celia Rios. We'd crossed paths years ago when she covered a series of pipeline accidents on the Gulf Coast. She was thorough, relentless, and allergic to corporate gloss. "Celia, I've got documentation," I told her. "And I've got a story they're trying to bury." We met in a quiet diner on the edge of town. I brought redacted files, time-stamped images, and interview summaries with former engineers who'd left Iron Bay in frustration. One of them, Evan Cruz, resigned in 2021 after his safety concerns were ignored. His name was buried in HR logs. I hadn't realized how many voices had been stifled before mine. Celia listened. I asked sharp questions. I took notes without blinking. "This isn't a headline," she said. "This is a reckoning." 2 days later, her exposé dropped on the Texas Chronicle's front page. 30 years of silence. The systemic failures behind Iron Bay's whistleblower crisis. My name was in bold. My evidence is cited line by line. It didn't erase the smear, but it challenged it. Publicly, credibly. By week's end, the SEC had escalated its investigation. Internal auditors resigned. Stockholders demanded a leadership shakeup, and Iron Bay's legal team stopped calling. The smear campaign had failed not because I shouted louder, but because I refused to shut up. I wasn't trying to destroy the company. I was trying to save people who might die if shortcuts were allowed to continue unchecked. And in that battle, my reputation wasn't the casualty. It was the weapon. 6 months after the first letter from Iron Bay hit my desk, I sat in a federal courtroom in downtown Houston, staring across the aisle at the man who had once controlled every safety decision in the company. Ryan Colt. Hair trimmed, jaw clenched, expensive suit, but something had changed. He looked smaller, not physically but in posture, in presence, like someone who finally understood the cost of arrogance too late to undo it. His lawyers whispered urgently as the judge called the session to order. I sat silently beside Jules and 2 federal investigators from the CSB. The room buzzed with tension. Investors, reporters, former employees. The people Colt had once dismissed as noise now gathered as witnesses. "Mr. Colt, how do you plead to the charges of knowingly authorizing falsified safety records and obstruction of federal compliance?" the judge asked. He stood. "Guilty, Your Honor." That one word rang like a bell through the courtroom. 2 other former executives entered guilty pleas that morning. One tried to hedge responsibility. The judge shut it down. The penalties were clear. Iron Bay would pay millions in fines, leadership would face sentencing, and the company's practices would undergo external monitoring for 5 years. But I wasn't there for punishment. I was there for clarity. Because in all the chaos, the subpoenas, the headlines, the boardroom meetings, what haunted me most was not what they'd done to me. It was how easily they thought they could get away with it. How they assumed no one would notice. No one would care. But I noticed, and I cared. As Colt was led out of the courtroom, our eyes met. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. But something in his stare said it all. He knew. I was the reason. He was no longer untouchable. Justice had arrived. Not quickly. Not easily. But decisively. Iron Bay tried to soften the blow with gestures. A formal letter of apology from the board. A reinstatement of my employment record. The full pension is backdated to the original vesting date. They even offered a senior compliance advisor position reporting directly to the board. I declined, not because I was bitter, but because I'd already done my part inside that system. It was time to do more outside. Instead, I accepted a new role, consultant to the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. My first task? Helping to design national protocols to better protect whistleblowers inside critical infrastructure sectors. The irony wasn't lost on me. The meticulousness that once got me labeled difficult or too cautious was now the standard. Miriam would have grinned. Told you that stubborn streak would pay off eventually. I could almost hear her say. With the settlement payout, the whistleblower award, and my reinstated pension, I had more financial stability than I ever imagined I'd see. But money was never the goal. Legacy was. So, I established something that felt right. The Miriam Dalton Fund for Industrial Ethics, a scholarship program for engineering students committed to safety, first systems thinking. We awarded our first grant to a young woman from San Antonio whose father died in a pipeline explosion years ago. She wanted to build better sensors. I told her to make them loud enough that no one could pretend they didn't hear. Meanwhile, Lila moved her family back to Texas. She said she didn't want her kids to grow up hearing about Grandpa from news clippings. She wanted them to see and know him. Her two boys, Ethan and Caleb, had endless questions. Why did that man lie about you, Grandpa? Did you fight him? Were you scared? I told them the truth. Yes, he lied. No, I didn't fight him like in the movies. And yes, I was scared. Then I told them something more important. Sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Especially then. On quiet mornings, we'd walk along the lake near my home, a place I bought not for status but for peace. The kind of peace that comes after the storm. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of resolution. I kept a small framed headline in my study. Whistleblower's testimony reshapes corporate ethics in Gulf infrastructure. I didn't display it for pride. I kept it as a reminder. Systems don't fail because no one saw the cracks. They fail because the people who saw them said nothing. And I never wanted to be that kind of man. Each year, Iron Bay now sends me its annual safety report. I read it carefully, like scripture. And while I no longer care for the corporate spin, I read the numbers. Because numbers don't lie, people do. And the numbers show real change. Investments in new inspection tools, transparent failure logs, an increase in near-miss reporting without punishment. It's not perfect, but it's better. And maybe that's the real win, not that I got everything back, but that what I lost had meaning. That it made something better. Some people say my story is about revenge, but they're wrong. It's about refusal. I refuse to be erased. I refuse to be intimidated. And I refuse to believe that silence was safer than truth. And in that refusal, I found something unexpected. Redemption. Not the kind handed to you in an envelope or a paycheck, but the kind earned one hard decision at a time. The kind that comes when you teach your daughter what integrity means and how it looks in the face of loss. The kind that whispers to your grandchildren that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. I didn't set out to be a whistleblower. I was doing the job as it was meant, with integrity, precision, and care. But when you speak up against a system built on silence, you find out who will stand beside you and who wants you to disappear. I lost my position. My reputation was dragged through the mud, and for a moment, I thought they'd won. But here's what I've learned. Truth has weight. It may move slowly, but it doesn't stop. And if you hold your ground, it finds its way to the surface. This story isn't just about corporate fraud. It's about what it costs to stand up when everyone else sits down. It's about remembering that your voice matters, even when it shakes. And that dignity isn't something a title gives you. It's something you defend, word by word, action by action. So, if you're watching this video and are stuck between silence and doing what's right, let this be your reminder. Speak, document, stand tall. You don't need to shout. You must hold the line long enough for the truth to catch up. And trust me, it always does.